We can let these cool. We can put these other pipes in the wall now.
Okay, yeah, why don't you hand those to us?
Well, Joe, these holes are pretty big for this 1/2-inch copper.
Well, I've drilled them 1 3/8 inches, and the reason I did that is I'm going to use these 2 insulators. Why don't you just split one of these and slip them right on the pipe there.
Okay.
And then you can just push them into that first ring right there.
Okay.
I'll let you do yours first.
Okay.
Got yours in?
Yep.
Okay. Now the reason I'm only just putting these in part of the way is that I still want to move this pipe, so I'm not... There you go.
What's the purpose of these insulators?
Well, these are going to keep your pipes from moving around because you've got energy in the pipe. And yet it's still going to allow the pipe to expand and contract as it heats up or cools down. So the pipe's moving and it's going to be quiet in the wall. Now I'm going to tie my cold into the cold pipe here. I have everything marked here so that I know where everything's going to go. So if you want to hand me that tea on the table.
Sure thing.
We left this pipe loose so we can move it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push this pipe back, and that's why we just left the tubes loose. Because once I pound those in, it's going to be so tight that it's going to be hard to move. So at this point, I'm going to use this as a guide here. I'm going to use a level here just to see where I'm at. And I'm going to just set that up on there so I'm level.
Okay. Are you going to mark your pipe on where to cut it?
What I'm going to do, I'm not going to mark where I'm going to cut it. I'm going to actually mark where the fitting is on the pipe.
Okay.
I'm going to do that at both top and bottom. Okay, at that point, I know where my fitting is going to be on the outside. So then here, you just hold that there. I'm going to use the fitting as my guide again, so I'm just going to set it up on the pipe. And at that point, I can scribe right where it's going to go in.
So now you're going to make the pipe a little bit longer so it fits inside the T?
There, so now I'm showing me where I actually can make my cuts on the pipe. So
I'd probably put an X on the first two mark just so I don't go to the wrong one.
You've only got one shot at this pipe to end up with a good cut. So and we're going to do the same thing on this next one here. First thing I'm going to do, though, before I cut, I'm going to push this down so these aren't in my way. So I got a little more room to swing my cutter in here. And then I'm going to use this cutter. I've got it right here with me.
That's a different kind of cutter, Joe.
This is a great little cutter. It's for close quarters. Gets in, you just snap it around the pipe, turn the cutter, and it does the self-tensioning and cuts it by itself.
Is that one size fits all, or?
This is only for 3/4 inch pipe. That's all it's for. That's this size pipe here.
You have a different one for 1/2 inch?
Yep, I got a smaller one, same thing.
Great.
So all we have to do is just...
We did turn off the main, right?
Yes, we did.
Okay.
Because that's an important issue here, because once we cut this, if this is live, we got a new problem. So I'm just going to clamp that on there, squeeze it, and all I can do is just turn it to cut it.
That's pretty slick. It doesn't seem to put much tension on the pipe either. The pipe hardly moved when you did that.
Well, it's a real fine wheel, and it cuts relatively quick for the size of this pipe.
Very good.
The ends of these pipes are sharp too, so you want to be careful so you don't run your finger across there and end up cutting yourself.
Great.
So the next step we have to do is we're just going to ream these, and then we can proceed to putting our T in.
Great. Well, Joe, looks like you're ready to solder these fittings. Before you do, why don't you explain how you got the fittings in the wall?
Well, when we cut the pipe on this, I found out I could just raise this pipe and I could slip my fitting in there, and we got lucky on that one. Lots of times you're not that lucky. When you cut it, you can't quite get your fitting in there, so one of the things you can do is you can slip your fitting up onto the pipe itself, and then you've only got to get 3/4 inch over this pipe. So at that point I can pull the pipe out, and I can kind of lift it up at the same time, and I can put it in and then kind of push it all in there gently.
Aren't you afraid that you might break a pipe off?
Well, that's a big concern, because I've got pipes that are attached up above and below, and I don't want to break any fittings there, so I got to be cautious that I don't do that.
Okay.
If I run into a situation where I just can't lift it up, can't pull it out enough, then my next option is probably go to a slip coupling at that time.
So you've got 10 fittings to sweat over there. Where do you begin?
Well, I'd probably start at the top right up here, and as I'm applying heat to this fitting, all of our joints are already fluxed up, and the flux is going to want to run down to the bottom. And I'm going to keep my joint as clean and neat as I can, so as I'm heating this and adding solder, that solder is going to run right down to that flux.
Just going to follow the flux?
Right, so as the flux is running down the pipe and as the pipe is hot enough to melt the solder, it's just going to keep following it. So I got a drip going down the pipe.
So how do you control that?
Well, to do that, logically we'd probably add the heat to the bottom and heat up, but in this case we're going to almost do it backwards. We're going to heat from the top, add our solder up at the top. I'm going to work out to my smaller fitting here, and I'm literally just going to kind of move down, and as I'm doing that, my solder is going to start coming down with me. So at this point, I might not even necessarily even have to add a lot of solder to this fitting. So at that point I have some control. And if I do get a drip here, I'm going to use this piece of insulation here that at the same time that if I see a drip, I'm just going to wipe it so I end up with a nice clean joint. And then while the fittings are still hot, I might wipe all the joints, and hopefully we'll end up with a nice clean joint.
No, you didn't use the insulation on the earlier sweating, so what's different about this?
Well, one of the concerns are when you're wiping a joint that if it's not stable, you could actually shake some of your solder out. This is nice and rigid here. So as I'm doing that, I don't have to worry about shaking my joint. So I'm just going to wipe it, and I can end up with a cleaner joint, but I do have to be concerned about that I could knock solder out of my fitting.
It looks like you're all set up over here to start soldering. Well, Joe, these guaranteed not to leak?
Well, I think we got good joints, but I'm going to take one more look at them. I'm going to wipe them off here and just give them a kind of a visual to see if I've got any bad spots on them, and they look like they're good here. And then I'm just going to clean them up a little bit here. It gives me another chance to look at them, and they just look a little better when I'm done. This is really not doing anything necessarily for the fitting. It's maybe just, it looks a little nicer when you're completed. So I think the next thing we can do is we can just finish putting our tube anchors in here, and we can move down to that end.
Hey Joe, while you're at it, will you install these nail guards?
It's a good idea. Obviously our pipes are real close to the surface, and we don't want any drywall screws to hit it, so also it's a code issue, so we should use these nail guards.
Well, Joe, considering that this is just one plumbing wall for a laundry tub, got to show quite a few different techniques.
Well, these are a lot of the common connections you're going to run into any plumbing project in your own home, so this would probably help you out quite a bit.
Well, you know, we started over here with these mission couplings. This worked out well because we were joining ABS to PVC, and we can't glue those. So the big deal here was we couldn't raise the stack, so we could just slide this into position.
Correct.
And then we had dissimilar materials, so we had this mechanical connection.
Exactly.
And it won't leak. We moved down here to this solvent welded joint. This was all PVC. We also had to be concerned about orientation. And I know you used your torpedo level and an indicator mark here to make sure that the vent line would rise plumb inside the wall. That worked out well too. These insulators that you installed in the wall, these were great. I've never seen a plumbing line this sturdy. This pipe will never rattle, never squeak.
Well, one other thing that we did when we were installing this pipe, we used these to help us as tools, just like we used this J-hook here. It was supporting the pipe while we were installing it. It was kind of like another hand.
Yeah, it was great. And down here, this was a pretty complicated plumbing area because we had 10 different joints that we had to solder all at once. And you had a lot to say about sequence and technique on this.
Well, if we were going to have a leak, this is probably the place it would have shown up at.
I'm sure we won't. You know, it's a shame in a way that this isn't a real laundry room, because I'm pretty confident it would have worked out well.